A few videos ago, I mentioned that the book of Exodus is a love story. It is the story of how a jealous God who loves his people makes his intentions known to take them as his very own, very much similar to how a man woos a woman to be his. Up till what we have learned, we have seen God display bold acts of passion and zealousness to rescue his people. However, as with every passionate love relationship, it should be taken to the next level: marriage. Israel had finally arrived at Mount Sinai 3 months after exiting the land of Egypt, and God decided at this moment to make his proposal to them. Calling Moses out of the mountain, he said, "Thus you shall say to the house of Jacob, and tell the people of Israel, you yourself have seen what I did to the Egyptians and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession among all peoples, for all the earth is mine. And you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the people of Israel." There is much significance to be found within God's words. Firstly, let's look at the word possession. It's translated from the Hebrew word segula, which refers to a king's most highly prized and most treasured possession. Wow! This was Yahweh's offer to Israel to be his very own crown jewel. Ladies, imagine a man asking you to be his crown jewel. Will you not feel cherished and treasured? I am pretty sure you would. However, Israel had a purpose for being so special and favored. They were not called to just enjoy an intimate relationship with him without paying attention to others. God had also said that they were to become a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. People today sometimes think that God plays favorites by selecting and favoring Israel. However, that is not to be the case. There is a reason for being selected and set apart by God. It's not to lord over others and be better than them. Israel had a specific calling to not only be fully devoted to God, but also represent him and reveal him to the rest of the nations. As a priesthood, they would be mediators between God and the nations. This proposal from God was a clear reiteration from what he had said to Israel's father Abraham. "I will make you a great nation, and in you all the families of the earth will be blessed." God always had an intention to bless the nations and make himself known, and he chose Israel to help him with this plan. But with every marriage proposal, it is only valid when the object of affection says yes. And as a woman looks excitedly into the eyes of her future husband to say yes, that was exactly what Israel did in verse 8. But like every marriage, saying yes was the easy part. Now that Israel had said yes, the wedding could commence. Right before that, the Lord instructed the people to get ready by consecrating themselves. They were to wash their clothes and not engage in sexual activity. Why did God instruct this? To the people of the ancient Near Eastern culture, this would not be unusual. Prior to any wedding is this ritual called the mikveh, which is a ritual cleansing of the bride before her wedding day. The ceremony to come was to take place on Mount Sinai, and the people were commanded not to go near the mountain or step foot on it, lest they be killed. As Yahweh descended onto the mountain, this mountain would become holy ground. Exodus 19 verse 16 to 20 describes the formidable scene that took place on that special day. For just this moment, I'd like you to envision yourself among the people of Israel that day. Feel the thunder erupting and shaking every ground, lightning flashing and lighting up the sky, a thick canopy of cloud upon the mountain, and an almost deafening trumpet sound. At the sound of the trumpet, you follow the people of Israel as they come upon the base of the mountain with much fear and trembling. And you can barely see a thing because the mountain is so thickly covered in smoke. Behold, the presence of the Almighty God who has ascended upon the mountain in fire. My friends, this is the God you worship. We often do not think of him this way, but this is who he is. Holy, majestic, terrifying, glorious. This is our God. The wedding ceremony had begun, and it was time for the reading of the wedding vows. In a Jewish wedding, the legally binding contract, called the ketubah, is read aloud and signed. Similarly, at this moment, God was about to present his conditions of the marriage contract to his people. This was where the 10 Commandments was revealed, and this was written by God himself on 2 tablets of stone. If you have been a Christian for a while, you would be familiar with the 10 Commandments. But because we are under the new covenant, it is easy for us to look at the 10 Commandments and all the other laws in the Torah as simply that, laws. However, it was so much more than that between God and Israel. As I had mentioned, every Jewish marriage came with a contract, essentially wedding vows that were legally binding. For God and Israel, these commandments were their wedding vows. They were conditions for a successful relationship. And as we look into just a few of the commandments, you will see how similar they are to any healthy relationship between husband and wife. First things first, the first commandment, you shall have no other gods before me. This marriage is established based on absolute exclusivity. There is no room for third parties. The second commandment continues on the theme of the first. You shall not make for yourself a carved image, any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not worship them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God. Can you hear the passion in God's voice? He knew that man is made to worship, and he did not want them worshipping any other idol or creating any idol for themselves. He wanted them to worship him and him alone. Now, cynics of Christianity might retort, why is this God so narcissistic that he wants to be the only one alone who is worshipped? To that, I may ask, how would you feel if your spouse, boyfriend, or girlfriend told you that you were being narcissistic for wanting to be the only romantic partner in their lives? Ouch. Another commandment to look at is the fourth. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Many covenants come with a sign or a symbol, and a marriage covenant is no different. So for modern day marriages, a sign or symbol of the covenant is the wedding ring. Well, the Sabbath served as a sign of the relationship between God and Israel. This would later be mentioned in Exodus 31 verse 16 to 17. For the sons of Israel shall observe the Sabbath, to celebrate the Sabbath throughout their generations as a perpetual covenant. It is a sign between me and the sons of Israel forever. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, but on the 7th day he ceased from labor and was refreshed. The Sabbath was a day for the people of Israel to stop their labor and devote the time to worship the Lord, a physical expression of the loving relationship between them. In modern day terms, I guess it could remind you a lot like date night. And what about the rest of the commandments? Progressing from commands that emphasized loving God, they now moved into the emphasis of loving people. Honor your father and mother, do not murder, do not commit adultery, do not steal, do not bear false witness, do not covet your neighbor's possessions. Interestingly, we can relate this to what Jesus had said in Matthew 22 verse 40, hundreds of years later. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the great and first commandment, and the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these 2 commandments depend all the law and the prophets. Can you see the parallel? The 10 commandments were not created just as laws to keep the people in check. They were given by God so that people knew the most important way to live by loving God and loving others. For most modern day Christian readers, the 10 commandments make a whole lot of sense even in today's day and age. because we can certainly still testify to the importance of the commandments. We certainly agree that we should not murder, commit adultery, lie, and so on. However, what happens when we go on reading the other laws that are mentioned in the Pentateuch? As we move on from Exodus 20 into chapters 21 to 23, we begin to read God's further instructions about issues that, well, we might not find so relevant in our lives today, such as the treatment of a Hebrew slave and penalties for what you must do if your bull gores someone to death, or if you dig a hole and someone else's donkey falls into it. So how do these laws, which are called case laws, apply to our society today? Well, they do not, but they do as well. A closer look at these case laws reveal that these laws are not additional laws on top of the 10 Commandments, but they are specific laws that flow from the general ethical principles asserted in these commandments. For instance, the intent of the law concerning the goring ox is to protect life. It points back to the commandment that God has given about not murdering. So once we understand this principle, we can read chapters 21 to 23, as well as future chapters about the laws with renewed understanding of God's heart behind them. And so Moses repeated all of these laws to the people of Israel, who heartily agreed. Everything the Lord has said we will do. This was both a corporate and individual agreement of the people of Israel. After this agreement, an altar was built, and the sealing of the covenant took place between the Lord and his people. So this is what Exodus 24 verse 4 verse 8 says. Moses wrote down all the words of the Lord. He rose early in the morning and built an altar at the foot of the mountain, and 12 pillars according to the 12 tribes of Israel. And he sent young men of the people of Israel who offered burnt offerings and sacrificed peace offerings of oxen to the Lord. And Moses took half of the blood and put it in basins, and half of the blood he threw against the altar. Then he took the book of the covenant and read it in the hearing of the people. And they said, "All that the Lord has spoken we will do, and we will be obedient." And Moses took the blood and threw it on the people and said, "Behold, the blood of the covenant that the Lord has made with you in accordance to these words." Sounds gruesome, but this was an affair not to be overlooked. It was a public ceremonial act symbolizing a solemn commitment. That life had to be sacrificed and blood had to be shed shows the seriousness and severity of this covenant. In essence, it was like God and his people saying, "Till death do us part." Once again, we see a similar parallel to a marriage vow, one that is, too, serious in God's eyes and not to be treated casually or broken at any whim. The Lord also called Moses, Aaron, and the elders of Israel up to the mountain, and it was there that they witnessed a glorious glimpse of heaven, the feet of the Lord, and under them a pavement of sapphire stones. Here the elders were invited to feast before the Lord. What a beautiful, stunning moment. This God, our God, he is a holy and righteous God whose voice makes the people tremble in fright and who requires us to walk in his ways to be his people. And yet, he is also a God who values alliance and friendship. The feast showed just that. Moses and the elders were brought to the banqueting house of the Lord, where his banner over them was love. And as we come to the end of today's session, I would like us to reflect on the many parallels of marriage, covenant, and relationship that were revealed through Exodus 19 to 24. I chose to focus on the emphasis of marriage in this session because this is an invitation for us to consider the character of God behind his commands and ordinations. You might have heard before that the Old Testament is full of laws that no longer apply to us because of the New Covenant. But hey, let's not be so quick to brush them all away as insignificant. God did not create laws to be a legalistic religious God. As all of us know, in every friendship or relationship, there are conditions in order for them to be successful. They must be soaked in love, mutual respect, and honor for the other party's heart. So what more? A covenant between God and His people. My prayer is that when we begin to see the heart of a God who desires to be an everlasting lover and heart to His people, our own hearts will begin to change towards the idea of obedience and laws. He does not desire for us to obey Him so that we can pat ourselves on the back for being good and law-abiding Christians. He only does so because He desires for us to enjoy each other in a deep union forever. So, will you say yes?